Hello there. Welcome to episode number 5 of the Maker Manager Money podcast, a podcast about entrepreneurs, solopreneurs, business owners, and business partnerships to inspire entrepreneurs to keep going and to inspire future entrepreneurs to just start. My name is Kyle Knowles, and it's a Saturday afternoon, and I'm chilling at Kiln, Salt Lake City. That's K-I-L-N as in Nancy. Kiln provides creative, virtual co-working and real-world office space. My guest today is Terry Allen, recently retired, former founder and owner of Alinco Costumes, the world's largest manufacturer of Mascot costumes. Terry, at the age of 16, created his first mascot head while working for his father, who owned Salt Lake Costume. In 1974, you're going to have to help me with this. Was it KGB Radio? KGB Radio, a San Diego-based rock station. KGB sounds wrong. Hopefully, see, I can edit all of this. So we'll just go with it because I typed KGB. I don't know if it was auto-corrected,
no,
but
KGB was the.
It was it.
Was it?
Because it's also a,
Yeah.
something to do with Russia, right?
Yeah.
The KGB. So, Okay, so I'll just keep going with it. In 1974. KGB Radio, a San Diego-based rock station, asked Salt Lake Costume to create a chicken costume for promotional use. That costume became the famous chicken, also known as the San Diego chicken. 3 years later, Terry and his wife Lola purchased the Alinco division of Salt Lake Costume, which went on to create over 50% of the NBA team mascots, including the Utah Jazz Bear. Besides the NBA, clients include the NFL, Disney, Pepsi, Nestle, and numerous high schools, colleges, and universities. Their mascot costumes have also appeared in commercials and movies, including Dumb and Dumber and Any Given Sunday. Alinco was an integral part of the history and development of mascots for parades and teams. The best handcrafted mascot costumes money can buy. I took that straight from the website. Terry, welcome to the podcast.
It's good to be here.
All right. Everyone knows the Jazz Bear, but few people know the company that made the Jazz Bear costume. Tell me about the history of mascots and what you invented and changed to make mascots better, because I know there's a lot of stuff that happened over the years.
Yeah, that's a deep question. Back shortly after we got started. Let's see how we can get into this easily.
Okay.
we actually, when I bought the company, our plans were to make Halloween masks.
Okay.
But it didn't take us long to figure out we couldn't compete with China, and that we did have a knack for the larger characters, and that we had a little bit of a reputation there. And we were actually recommended by a fellow costume shop in Phoenix to their mascot, which was a gorilla. The guy who owned the suit left town, and so now they needed a gorilla costume, but they had some very specific things in mind. And so we created the Phoenix Suns gorilla, and that was kind of interesting because I had to go out and buy a fax machine so that we could send pictures back and forth, as bad as they were, of what we were doing. And but anyway, that was probably our first. It was our first NBA mascot. But it was our first realization that mascots were going in the wrong direction. Mascots in the past had always been what we call meet and greet characters. Their sole purpose was to stand on the corner and wave or shake people's hands and that. And not much was required of them. Then all of a sudden we're doing slam dunking basketballs and dancing and all kinds of crazy things. So we did the gorilla, and then we got contacted by Seattle. They wanted a Yeti costume, a Squatch.
Okay.
And very similar to the gorilla, but we had some unique problems in the fact that they needed a really long nap fur, and none of the commercial fur makers manufactured anything longer than about 3 inches. So we had to find some sources for some really long fur, and had to have the fur custom made for the they called him Squatch, and we again created a very performance oriented mascot, and so then we were contacted by the Jazz. We had actually had a couple of situations with the Jazz, but again, the mascots were going down the wrong road. And so this gave us a new chance to come back and create something that was performance-oriented. And I was fortunate enough to be at the tryouts for the bear. And when I found out who was going to be the bear, first thing I said was, we got to put a helmet in that costume.
He must have been doing some wild stuff.
Yeah, he was doing some real wild stuff. And from then on, a huge percentage of professional mascots that are performance-oriented, they have helmets in their costumes because they do some of the stupidest stuff. But, yeah. And so that's kind of where our lead-in went into the NBA, and then it was just word of mouth after that, and we went on to create additional mascots, Chicago Bulls. I've been out of the business too long, but we were doing 50 to 60% of the NBA's mascots for quite some time.
Okay, so when you talk about performance mascot, what was it before performance mascots, and what were kind of maybe the technologies or the inventions that you changed, and what was it, and what did you take it to as far as the new performance standards for mascots?
If you go back into the history of mascotting, depending upon which side of the pond you were on, in England and Europe, they called them pantomime costumes. In the United States, we called them parade heads. And that's basically what they were used for, is they would walk in a parade. And they would, just shake hands and do little silly things, but nothing that required very much acrobatics or any real performance.
And the mascot was just a big head on someone that had other.
The bigger the head, the better. I mean that. Yeah. So they wanted to be visible, and so So the when the NBA started doing the more performance-oriented characters, then it took everybody down that road. Now your mascots are all leaner, trimmer. In fact, that was one of the things for a while is the fitness craze. They wanted the mascots to embody the fitness craze. So where they had a fairly rotund mascot in the past, they said we need to slim him down. We need to train. And, he's been working out at the gym.
Make him look athletic.
Make him look more athletic, exactly. Yeah.
Okay, so what about the Jazz Bear? He's so active. He's sliding downstairs, running, jumping, doing flips and stunts. Mm-hmm. How often does the Jazz Bear need a new costume?
He's gone through a lot over the. I can't even think about how many years we've been making that, but he's gone through a lot. And usually, what he has is three costumes that he's using at one time, and then every year or so he'll replace one in that. It was kind of interesting because the original Jazz Bear, for the longest time, he had what was his lucky head, and if he was going to do something dangerous, he had to wear that head.
And what was different about that head? It was just it was the same as anything else, but it was just the one he would use.
It was the one he would use. It was the lucky head.
Okay.
And so we repaired it. We rebuilt it. And finally it got to the point that there was nothing left of the original head except the nose. And we had to finally convince him that he had to move on. But that was a real hard sell to get him to give up that head.
I bet. Can you explain the process of making a mascot costume? What goes into that? Start with the drawing. You have to do drawings, right?
Well, actually, it starts further back than that. Actually, it starts with just the idea we need a mascot, or we want a mascot, or in some even further than that is we need to draw attention to our product.
Okay.
And so they explore different avenues. Mascots are one of the cheapest ways to get brand recognition. You create a character and you put him out there and you build the relationship. And, it costs very little to stick a mascot in a parade or send him out to a sporting event or whatever. And so they're a very economical way to promote your product.
Okay.
It's kind of interesting because actually in recession years, our business goes up a little bit because people are thinking, okay, we can't afford that television ad anymore, but we can get a mascot. We can send him out to all the games and such. So a lot of time it just begins with that idea that we need some way to promote the product. Then they start researching what it should be. When they come to us, hopefully they have some kind of an idea, but we literally had people come say, we need a mascot with no.
They want you to give the ideas, right?
And so, it's good to try and find something that their market will relate to. And so we start off there, and then we need to know what they want the character to do. Again, it's a meet and greet. It's performance oriented. Just what kind of issues are we going to have to overcome in building the character? Then we go to the drawing board, and a lot of times they'll have a sketch or a logo or something like that we're working from. But then we have to take it and we have to say, okay, if we're going to put a person in it, this is what it's going to look like. And, a lot of times that's a hard sell because that's not what their original design, was in the complete form. But you have to bring them into the real world and say, okay, you want him to slam dunk basketballs, he's got to have mobility in his arms and legs, and the fact that your character is a peanut, is we have to work around those things.
Yeah, it's going to limit your chances to
limit the chances. Yeah. And then once we get that far, then we have to look at, okay, what's the construction going to be? Are there going to be some specialty things we have to do, like have special fur made? And then when we kind of work through that, then we get into talking price and that with the customer and letting them know what, I mean, we usually have given them some kind of a general idea what the ballpark is, but then we get into specifics on the price. But then the creative part is always full of surprises. So, there's always something that you didn't count on. And, and then there's always, they'll might throw a little kink in the last minute and say, oh, by the way, we want him to purr when you rub his tummy.
Got to add the sound effects.
Got to add. So and then the unveiling's always the great part when when you get to send him out and see how the public reacts.
Yeah. So you have to draw. You have to have some artists drawing some sketches.
Uh-huh.
Okay. And then you're talking through materials and colors and all these kinds of things for fabrics. So you got to order all that. When do you start making molds and things like that for the costume head and things like that? And talk through kind of from sketching it out through the manufacturing process to a finished costume.
Well, I mean, we separate the head and the body a little bit because the manufacturing techniques are a little bit different. Because usually with the body, you're working more with fabrics and more with the, sometimes you're working with especially padding, or you might be putting some tubing into the costume or something to get some special shapes, or and then the head usually requires some kind of a mold or a sculpting or something. A lot of times, like especially with a professional mascot character, we will actually do a life mask of the individual that's going to wear the costume, so that we make sure that the fit is going to be perfect. Because for those characters, vision is everything.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have to make sure that the placement is right for the eyes and that it's going to be comfortable. And then from there, we will actually sculpt on that life mask the character that is going to be the final result. But then again, there's a lot of different components. I mean, sometimes it's just a latex mask that, I mean, like in the Phoenix Gorilla is really just a mask. It's a mask. It's sculpted for the individual, and it has some special strapping and special things inside it that make it fit perfectly. But basically, it's just a mask.
Yeah.
Where the bear is a complete head and is built on a hockey helmet. And so you've got the latex face piece, you've got the helmet, you've got foam sculpting that's got to be used for the general shape of the head, and then you got the fur, of course, have the fur covering that goes over the top of it and the painting and everything. So it's an involved process.
And these are all handmade.
Oh, absolutely. There's no other way to do it, Except, it's kind of interesting now because I've been out of the company for a little over a year now. And I go back in, and they're 3D printing a lot of stuff. Okay. And I'm saying, that's cheating, But it's really cool what they're doing now because they've got plotter routers, they've got 3D printers, they've got all these things. So they've taken it to a new level.
Awesome. So how much did your dad owning Salt Lake Costume influence you going into business for yourself?
Probably everything. Let me just kind of tell you kind of the story of the Salt Lake Costume. and then we can. The Salt Lake costume was, the oldest document we ever found was dated 1889.
Wow.
So we know the Salt Lake costume existed before then, but that's the first thing that we can, the oldest thing that we can find that was part of Salt Lake costume, and so it was doing local theatrical productions basically, and at one time. There was a college textbook. I can't remember the name of it, but anyway, it listed three companies in the United States where to get costumes from. One was Brooks Van Horn in New York. One was Western Costume in Los Angeles, and the other was Salt Lake Costume.
Wow.
So, so it was, so it had a reputation. My dad worked for Salt Lake Costume during the recession, and he started out working for $2 a day on a day-by-day basis. And the man who owned it back then, his name was John Hansen. And he would, at the end of the day, he'd plunk $2 down on the counter and he'd say, "Come back tomorrow." And after a while, it was a permanent position. And then he promised my dad that when he was ready to retire, that he could move in and buy and buy out the costume company. Well, when it got to that point, Mr. Hansen's son had decided he wanted to get into the business. So my dad left and started a company called Intermountain Costume Company. And he'd been saving because he knew this day was coming, or not particularly this day, but when he was going to have to make this decision. But anyway, so he started Intermountain Costume, and then there was another costume company in Salt Lake called Hillam Costumes, and the gentleman there was Rod Hillam, and he came to my dad and said, "I want out. Will you buy Hillam Costume?" And so they worked out a few things, and he was able to acquire Hillam Costume. Well, shortly after that, John Hansen's son, Wiley Hansen, came to my dad and said, "I don't like the costume business. Are you still interested?" And they worked out some trades where they traded the playbooks and the makeup and that as a down payment, and then he went into what was then called Hansen Play and Novelty. But anyway, so trying to shorten the story a little bit. But anyway, so in about 2 years process, my dad went from working for Salt Lake Costume to owning 3 different costume companies, and he bought Salt Lake Costume actually the year I was born. So that kind of sealed my fate. But so I grew up in the costume company. I worked there from, I can remember stacking boxes for 10 cents an hour, and so it went on from there. And then there was a little bit of friction between my dad and I when I got older. I kind of had some ideas, and he wanted to do things the way they'd already been done, but I had somebody come to me and suggest that we buy out what was then called Alinco Alinco Display and Associated Arts. And it was basically building stage props. But it was only doing like $35,000 a year. But we could see some potential. And again, we thought we were going to make Halloween masks. But anyway, so that was in 1977. And then a year later, I bought my partner out. He was a little nervous that it was more work than we expected. And so, growing up in Salt Lake Costume had everything to do with me ending up in making mascots.
And what did you learn from your father running a business, and what did you learn in the business? Because I know you're an artist and you can do stage makeup, and I know that you can make it look like you have a cut on your face and those kinds of things. Did you learn all that from your father, or just working in the business?
Well, working in the business, I learned a lot about the theater makeup because my dad. Handsome Play and Novelty eventually went out of business, and so we had to carry makeup again. And at that point, my dad said, "Well, you're in charge of makeup," and so and it was kind of fun. I thought this was really cool stuff to do, and so I would, this from the time I was in high school to I was always building. Some kind of a monster makeup or whatever. Anyway, so I was in charge of the makeup department, and so I had to learn what all these products did. And so that actually led to me teaching theatrical makeup at Westminster College for a couple of years, which was really fun. I enjoyed doing that. I think, like you said, I sculpted my first head when I was 16. It was kind of a situation where they were working on a character. They were doing a dragon, and my two brothers were sculpting it. And I kept saying, "That looks like a cow. That doesn't look like a dragon." And finally, they said, "Okay, you do it." And then from then on, I was doing the sculpting. So.
And then what about art and drawing? Were you doing drawings and art?
Yeah, well, in the beginning, I was the artist. I was the sculptor. I was, pretty much everything in the company. But, yeah, I took a lot of art classes in school. It was I knew that artists, per se, didn't really make a lot of money, that it was pretty hard to be a commercial, not a commercial, but I can't think of the word right now. But anyway,
like a professional
artist. And so I actually thought, well, I'll probably teach art. I think that'll give me time to do my own projects. And but anyway, that was kind of not to be. But I studied a lot of art. I studied art in college, and I studied art all through high school and everything. Probably the best thing I ever did, though, is because I made a decision to switch careers, and I started studying accounting. I took 2 years of accounting, thinking that maybe I would be an accountant, and that proved totally invaluable. Because I could sit down with my accountant, we could talk, and we could make sense of what each other was saying. So
the finance side of the business.
The finance side of the business
you had
really
some background
helped.
in that.
Yes,
college. Okay.
Yeah.
So this podcast is the Maker Manager Money podcast, and there's a concept about basically a maker schedule and a manager schedule. A maker needs big blocks of time on their calendar to make things, right? Mm-hmm. And then a manager schedule is usually filled up every 30 minutes, every hour, just meetings, and we got to get this done, got to get that done. From what I can gather, just talking to you in this short time, you were definitely a maker, because you were drawing, you were sculpting, especially in the early days of Alinco. Mm-hmm. Until you had employees, you had to basically do all of that. But then you also had to sort of manage the business, right? You talk about accounting, sitting down with your accountant. So how did you manage those two different types of basically work styles?
A lot of late nights.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, that's the one thing. Anybody thinking about getting into a business, they've got to understand that they're going to have limited free time. That they're going to, especially in the early times, they've got to be able to devote, 16 hours a day. But the one thing about it is that you also can balance your time. So I never missed a soccer game. I never missed a dance recital. I was always able to be where my kids needed me. But a lot of times, as soon as it was over, I went out the back door and was back at the office for whatever needed to be done. So, it's you have to juggle it in the beginning, but then unfortunately what happens is that as businesses grow, you become less the maker and more the manager. And that's hard. But it's an important thing that has to be taken care of, and quite frankly, I found people that were a lot more talented than I was, to come in and fill in a lot of what needed to be done, but
so you were able to go through that transition and find out that on the other end of that transition was like, well, this actually works because you were able to hire talented people and start managing them, doing the making, basically.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's a hard transition, but it's one that and it's one that I probably wished I hadn't had to do, because I would have been a lot. I enjoyed the making part of it, but to grow the company, that's what had to happen.
Okay. So you started, when you started Alinco Costumes, you started with very little. It wasn't like you had venture capital and someone coming in and, here's $100,000 to get going. Yeah. How did you sort of bootstrap and get things going? What was your strategy?
I mortgaged my house to make a down payment, and went to several bankers before I got anybody that'd listen to me. As one banker said, that's a lot of blue sky you're buying. And another one said to me, you're not buying a business, you're buying your freedom. And so anyway, we finally got somebody that would listen to us, and we had already separated that part of the business into another location, because it's not so much that it had grown, but it kind of got pushed out of the costume company building, so we had found another location for it. And so we were already set up in a new location, and that made the transition a little bit easier. I could, we bought a lot of our furs locally from local fabric stores. At the time, there was a wholesale fabric upholstery company that had a lot of fur that we were able to go in and buy there. But most of the mills wanted 300-yard minimums, so it took us a little while to get to the point where we could buy and we could bring in 300 yards of a one color, one style fabric.
Okay. So at some point, you had to invest in promoting the company to grow it.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
What was your strategy around promotion?
Well, our initial strategy was really based on an organization called the National Costumers Association. We felt like there was a sufficient market there for us to be able to maintain a constant relationship with companies because mascots, for the most part, in most cases, are a one-shot thing. They come in, they get the mascot, they use it for their promotion, and it's not like the colleges, universities, and professional mascots. They're usually based upon an advertising concept. But the National Costumers Association, they were costume shops that were out there dealing with the public. And a lot of times if a company needed a costume, they would go down to the local costume company and say, hey, what can you do for us? And so we invested a lot in going to their trade shows and and making a name for ourselves with them. We came up with what we called the head of the month. And because they needed rental stock, and so they needed cows and horses and gorillas and things like that. So we came up with what we called the Head of the Month Club, and if they would sign up for the club, they could buy a new head every month at a discounted price, and that kind of kept us going for a while. It was hard in the beginning, yeah.
So I know you've attended trade shows all over. Was that just with this organization, or sometimes you would go to Europe or other places for trade shows as well?
No, it was that was our initial start with companies, but then we realized that a lot of the rental companies were getting into party rentals, and which included costumes. So we would go to the rental association trade shows, and then I think we moved on from there. We moved to the International Amusement Park Show, and from there we started doing the international shows. So it was, it was just kind of keeping our ears to the ground and saying who might be able to use our costumes. And then there was also the Halloween show, which was, for the longest time, was our biggest show. I mean, we would go to that. It was usually in March, and a lot of times it was a trick to get all the orders put out for the customers by Halloween. So
would you have to bring on additional employees to kind of help get some of these orders made by Halloween, or?
Yeah, we used a lot of part-time help from time to time to come in and help finding skilled people who can do what we were doing. It's always been a trick, always been a bit of a problem to be able to find people that, sewing skills are something that they're not teaching anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, I bet. So other than trade shows, was there any other kind of promotional activities that you would do, like direct mail or any other kind of promotional activity?
We tried direct mail a little bit, did not have a lot of success with it, but our biggest form of advertising was word of mouth. Somebody would say, "Where did you get that?" And our name would come up, and the next thing we knew, we had an order. So, it was. I would dare say that probably 50 to 60% of our business came from a referral.
Okay, and then as far as the mascots or costumes that you make. What percentage are more team mascots and what percentage are outside of sort of the team mascot?
Well, that's shifted over the years. Right now, probably we're probably looking at about 60% team mascots, and probably and I'm talking anything from junior high school. To maybe about 20-30% are advertising agency, or well, not advertising agency, but used for advertising and promotional that. And then there's always something that you hadn't planned on is somebody who wants a mascot for something.
Something outside that even. Do you ever have individuals call you up and say, I want a gorilla costume for a party I'm going to, a bachelor party or something?
You know, this is before I retired, but it wasn't so long ago that I got a phone call from an individual who was the grandson of the founder of Arctic Circle Restaurants. And years ago, we made the AC Bird for Arctic Circle, and he was doing a memorabilia thing. And he said, "I've got a body, but I don't have a head. I can't find a head anywhere. Can you reproduce the head for me?" And it was kind of fun because basically I said, "Well, I actually sculpted the original head, so yeah, we can do that for you." But he was doing this memorabilia thing, and so we made a new AC Bird head all from scratch.
Did you have the old drawings or anything, or did you just look at pictures?
We had photographs, but I was surprised how few pictures we were able to come up with.
Okay.
But I did kind of have it pretty firmly in my memory what it was and how big it was and how it. So
you got to raise your hand and say, "I'll make this my passion project," and do a little making instead of managing for a while.
Yeah. It got me out of the office for a few days.
Nice. Okay, so who are some of the most famous athletes or people you've met over the years because you've been involved with all these sports teams and Disney and Hollywood?
Oh. Problem is, most of the mascots we've done, I can't tell you their names.
Right, they're celebrities that are unknown,
unknown celebrities, and I'm bad at names. I did have the opportunity of doing. Again, I'm so bad at names. Grandpa Munster. I had the opportunity of doing his makeup.
Nice,
and that was that was kind of a fun experience. But and so much of what we do, we don't know actually where it ends up. So,
do you ever get tickets to go to games or whatever where these mascots are displayed?
Yeah, I used to get jazz tickets occasionally, but the more popular the jazz became, the less I got tickets. Right. So, but and a lot of times I haven't been the beneficiary of it, but I know my kids have. They'll be someplace on a trip and for business reasons or whatever, and because they've got a contact, they know the mascot, and you build up relationships, and they'll give them a call and they'll say, "Hey, well, I got a game tonight. Why don't you come?" And sometimes they'll actually end up helping out in the behind the scenes,
helping with the costume. Yeah. Nice. If you could go back in time and talk to yourself when you were just starting your own business, what are some of the things that you would say to yourself?
Well, that's that depends a lot on the time. I once had a gentleman in my office, and he was looking around. He says, "You're pretty proud of yourself, aren't you?" And I said, "Well, we're doing okay, And he says, "Someday you'll wish you'd worked for the post office." And there have been times where I had wished I'd worked for the post office. But, going back and changing things, that's always a tricky question because, you think this might be a good thing to change and not do or do something. But that changes where you are right now or the other experiences you've had. So going back and actually changing things, I had things I regretted at the time, But, you know, when you look back on them and you see, okay, this happened and this happened, this happened, so maybe it wasn't so bad after all.
Understood. So you had a unique business partner. Tell me about Lola and her role in the success of Alinco.
There would be no Alinco without Lola. Lola's my wife, and she put up with me. And not only did she put up with me, but she made sure that every single costume that went out that door was perfect. She dealt with the customers. You know, they would contact her. She would work them through the process. She would help them design and get the costume created. And then when it went out the door, it had better be exactly what she had promised the customer. And that's why word of mouth worked for us. And, I mean, it's a touchy subject. Alinco wouldn't be anywhere without Lola. She was, I don't know, she was the one who kept things going. You know, she'd say to me, "You don't go to work, you go out to play." But she was the one who went to work. And so, yeah, best move I ever made.
Points out the importance of having a life partner that's also supportive in the business. But she was not only your life partner, but actually a business partner. And helping with the business as well. You know,
it's interesting because we would go to lunch every day together, but I worked in one building and she worked in the other building. And some days I think that saved our marriage. But yeah, but having a life partner that shares your vision and, like I say, she, there's just wouldn't have happened. I'd probably still be trying to make Halloween masks. I don't know.
You might be working for the post office.
Might be working for the post office. Yeah, exactly.
Right. Okay. So no, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say she always offered to put me through medical school.
So what would you say to someone who is going to start out a business now? What are some of the words of wisdom and advice that you would give to someone, since you had so many years of running your own business? Someone's going to start out, they come to you and say, I'm thinking of starting a business. What's some of the advice that you would give them?
Well, I was really fortunate because I had grown up in the costume industry. I had, managed a portion of the Salt Lake costume. I kind of understood the industry. So I would say, number one is do your homework, do your research, make sure you understand what you're getting into. Talk to people in the industry. It would, when we were looking for me to retire, we were approached individuals about buying the company. But for the most part, we found that their vision wasn't the same. They didn't really understand the industry. In a lot of cases, they were focused on maybe a very small portion of the business. And so as it worked out for me, the greatest thing was my kids said, well, we would like to buy the business. And I was really hesitant because of everything I'd been through. I kind of felt like, I don't want to put you through that too, but they were, they were sure they wanted to do it, and we could see how the pieces would fit together. And so they're taking the company to another level, and they have relatively same vision as I did for the company. So, it's, like I say, you better really understand your product, your industry, and who your market's going to be, and then understand that. When I look at Alinco, we started out making costumes and heads for the costume industry, for costume rental shops. Well, you'd be hard-pressed to find a costume rental shop today. So things are going to change, and you've got to be able to read the market, be ahead of the market, and and make those changes before you find yourself, that customer base doesn't exist anymore. Just the simple thing like being able to have 2 years of accounting before I started the business. It's totally different from what I was doing, but that knowledge became invaluable. So,
what's the craziest costume that someone had you make?
Boy, that's really kind of hard because that's there's
their customers, their clients. Yeah. You don't want to say their costume was ugly or crazy.
Yeah, our biggest problem in that area is the thing that I would hate is a university would come to us, and 15 years ago somebody's mom made the costume, but it is what it is, and they want it duplicated, and a lot of times I've been tempted to just say, no, we're not interested. But usually the disclaimer is don't tell anybody who made it. But so remaking somebody's old problems has always been complicated, and then you've always got something like a hurricane or a tidal wave how do I get a tidal wave to slam dunk basketballs?
Yeah, how do you even depict a tidal wave or a hurricane?
Yeah,
in a mascot. So I guess maybe not the craziest costume, but what's one of the most difficult ones you've made over the years?
I think one of the most unique is the Dallas Mavericks. Their Mavs man. They came to us and they said, we want a human basketball, but he's got to be able to slam dunk. And so we had to create basically a bodysuit. So it was based lycra type bodysuit that had the patterns of a basketball. But the trick is they said, well, we want it to feel like a basketball when they touch it. It may be out of lycra, but we want it to feel like a basketball. And we did a lot of research, and we finally found some screen printing processes that allowed us to get the look and feel that we were looking for. But that was quite tricky, and laying out the design so that it was a basketball character, and that was a little bit of a challenge.
And how was it received when you unveiled it then?
It was received very well. They used it for a number of years. I probably shouldn't say this, but I kind of don't watch sports anymore. And so I'm not sure if they're still using it, but yeah, they used it for probably 10, 15 years at least, and it was, my problem is because of the uniqueness of the screen printers, the screen printing process that needed to be, is that we'd get a screen printer to print it once, and then when we'd come back, they said, no, we won't do that again.
So you had to find another screen printer?
We had to find another screen printer every time we needed a new
It's too
costume.
Complicated, or what? Why wouldn't one want to
Well,
do
it was very complicated. There was a lot of issues with registration, and then it not only required the screen printing process, but it required a special heating. The fabric had to be treated and heated after the printing, and that was very time consuming, and so it was
took more time than they bid for you to pay them to do, right?
Yeah. It wasn't worth it.
Okay, so what's a book that you recommend the most to people?
I don't know. Probably the book I recommend the most, and probably everybody's read it, and that's Good to Great. Yeah, and it's it just has you just take a look at your business and you say, okay, yeah, we could be doing things better. We could be moving to another level. And so that's a good book that I and I wish I knew the author.
Jim Collins. Yeah, it's a great book.
And then another book that I would recommend to somebody who is thinking about going to school and but wants to get into their own business, because it might not be politically correct, but I don't think everything requires an MBA. And the book I'd recommend there is The Personal MBA, and I'm not sure who wrote that.
Josh Kaufman.
Okay.
It's an excellent book.
Yeah. And I, because I do think that, you can spend a lot of time in school and nothing's more valuable than doing. Nothing's more valuable than actually, having the project in front of you and building a mascot.
Doing a business.
Yeah.
Can learn a lot more by doing than going to school.
Exactly.
Yeah, I agree. I don't know if it's politically correct or not, but you're not the first guest that said that. So we're leaving it all in, Terry. All right. So I have a lightning round of questions that I ask each guest just for fun to get to know you a little bit better. Favorite candy bar?
Favorite candy bar? Oh, don't eat candy bar a lot. I seem to have a thing for licorice right now.
Okay.
I don't know.
We'll take that, licorice. Favorite musical artist?
Oh, you got to go back years. I like a lot of groups, and that I grew up with folk music, and so you got Brothers Four Kingston Trio, Limelighters, all those guys. But coming forward a little more, you got James Taylor and Jim Croce. I love him. So
I was going to guess the Eagles for some reason. Did you
I
ever
like
get into the Eagles?
I like the Eagles.
Yeah.
I like the Eagles, but I don't know. They're a little after my time, just a little bit.
So you like the singer-songwriter, guitar singer?
Yeah. The live performer.
Nice.
Yeah.
Favorite cereal?
Favorite cereal? Oh, I don't know. I eat a lot of oatmeal.
Me too. Me too. We'll go with that. Mac or PC?
Well, I've always been exposed to PC, so I'm stuck with PC. I hate everything about it, but I've never been able to really get in and work with a Mac, so I'm no expert there. I mean, I go back to DOS, and I actually wrote our accounting software that we used for a while. Program called Foxbase, which was a database program, and that. But the programs that are coming out now, I'm tired of programs thinking that they know what I want to do before I do it, because that's not usually what I want to do.
Okay, Google or Microsoft?
I really struggle with Microsoft because I think they're one of the worst at trying to tell you what you want to do. And I think so many of the times their software has overshadowed software that was better, but because it was Microsoft, that became the standard. Google, unfortunately, I use Google as a search engine. That's basically what I do. So,
okay, dogs or cats?
Dogs or cats? Well, yeah, dogs are dogs are better. Yeah, I mean, I like cats, but they sit on the couch over there. The dog sits in your lap.
Phantom or Les Mis?
Oh, well, I absolutely love both. It was really nice that we were able to be in London for so many trade shows that I got to see Les Mis and Phantom a number of times. But heads down, Les Mis.
All right. Well, thank you, Terry, for making time to come out of retirement to talk about Alinco Costumes and share your entrepreneurial journey. It's been a pleasure hearing it face to face, and I'm sure it will inspire other entrepreneurs and future entrepreneurs. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.